Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Let's Chat Live, a show where we do weekly live interviews and connect you to the voices behind the podcast that you want to listen to. I am part of your host, Bri, producer and kind of co-creator of Let's Chat Live, and today we have one of our favorites, Dwight Hurst of the Broken Brain podcast. Dwight and I have been working for over a year together on and off, and this is our first episode together.
Yeah, hosting. It is. You had just asked me the other day. You were like, "Hey, have we hosted together?" And my first thought was we must have, but no, me and Ben did, and then I think I was alone because I'm always on when Chris bails.
That's right. Poor Revel. Well, yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and kind of like what you do? Because you're not just a podcast; you're a producer.
Yeah, we're so much more. No, my main show, the podcast that I do is called The Broken Brain, and it's about psychology and culture, basically. That's my background, is working in mental health, therapy, and counseling, and we try to make sure that we bring out what's interesting about the world and the way that we look at it psychologically. And then, of course, you, me, and Chris, we work together with Pop Collar Productions, is something that we're getting off the ground in order to put together some shows that we're producing. We got a couple of good podcasts up and running already. There's the Wiseman Method about detox and opioid dependence. We got the Rise Today inspirational podcast, and then I know that's not what the show's about, but we're working out that show for Selwyn Jones, George Floyd's uncle, who's been working with us. So we've been doing some cool things. Yeah.
Awesome. Good for us.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of work.
We just wanted everyone to know that we rock at the beginning of the show.
And speaking of rocking, before we bring on our amazing guests, I just wanted to mention the Let's Chat Live Club really fast. It's an online community to empower content creators and creatives to monetize their passion projects while making industry connections, where we build and help strengthen their brand, offer classes, we have networking opportunities, and we can help with your content needs. And you can check us out at letschatpodcast.net.
And I just today had somebody on Facebook who said something nice about you, and then you had said something as well about something we got to work on, and man, I jumped on there and just said, anything that Bri does, she does really well, so everybody ought to be part of this, because the rest of us help out. We pretend, but really, if you want advertising, social media stuff, Bri is the one to do that for you. So
you're so sweet. Why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest for
today?
I'm
super excited. Bri had told me about this. Not only do I get to host, which I always love, but today we're going to have Will and Gabriel coming on. They are the creators and hosts of the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. It's a podcast made by fathers who have children who are now in heaven, and they're on a mission to encourage other dads to have gone through loss and grief as well. So this is a powerful one, and I'm really just grateful to be here and to meet them.
Absolutely.
So why don't we, bring them in and let's see how they're doing.
Hi, Glenda.
They were in the green room. We have a splendid spread for people.
Hey, guys. Coffee back there and everything.
It was good. The spice chai was the best. I'm going to recommend that.
Oh, nice. The only downside is you have to provide it yourself because it's at your home.
It was good. I iced it. It was so hot today.
You're so sweet, Glenda. Glenda is like our ultimate fan. We love her so much. She has just helped out all the podcasts that we have on Twitter. She's always watching. She's always promoting and talking about it. So we are happy to have you here, Glenda. Awesome. And we are also happy to have Will and Gabe.
Hey, thank y'all so much. So nice to meet y'all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
how long have you been doing your show?
We started back in December. It's been kind of a journey getting there, but I guess we talked about it, in August or something like that. And it took us a little while to put it together. It took a little encouragement, I guess, to actually move forward with it. And it seemed a little daunting, at least for me, to record my voice and have people listen to it and critique it. And so it took a little bit to get there, but yeah, it's been going on since December, and we actually, just before we got on with y'all, we recorded an episode, and that was our 14th.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. Some podcasts get into it. They're like, yeah, I'll gung ho about it. And then after the third episode, they're like, this is a lot harder than I anticipated.
That's true. Yeah.
And just putting yourself out there, like you said, I think it takes a certain amount of courage. Well, for anybody to do anything public, but especially, I mean, you guys are really becoming quite vulnerable through this process.
Yeah, man, and I think that's kind of why that's our driving force, because when we went through what we went through individually, we didn't have really anything like this that was out there. And so that was, for me, that was like 16 years ago. For Will, that was just about a year and a half ago. And so when he was looking around internet, bookstores, whatever, just nothing really targeted to dads, that had gone through something like that. And so, we know how much it would have meant to us to have some other men to talk to that had been down this journey, or to at least listen to them share their story, which is what we're trying to do. And so that really pushes us. So we're like, man, here's all the things, that we went through, that we struggled with. And so Will's done a great job just getting us a lot of content ready, and he's really putting it all together. And then we're going to be on for a while, we hope.
That is good to hear. So for someone who hasn't heard of your podcast yet, can you give us like a short blurb about who you guys are and what your show is about?
If you listen to the podcast, you'll find out it's hard for me to give a short blurb about anything. Yeah, like Gabe said, both of us have lost children. Gabe had triplet girls back in 2005, and they lived
a day, 3 weeks, and 3 months.
And my wife and I had a son born September 30th of 2019. He was born on his due date. He was stillborn, and everything was totally normal up until then. Didn't have any expectations of anything going wrong. So we really just, like Gabe said, we looked out for something else. I remember when I went to the hospital, like I took my Bible with me because I'm like, I don't really know what else I'm going to do, but I guess I'm just going to read the Bible, and tried to find like Bible apps and stuff like that where you could find like a reading plan for stillbirth or miscarriage or something, or, looking for an app or podcast. And there was a lot out there for mothers. And like we both said, like, that's awesome. Like, we're really glad that there are those resources out there. But it was just kind of weird listening to it as a father and being like, the child didn't grow inside me. I didn't feel and move. And, I don't have that same relationship. And so the loss isn't exactly the same. It's more, I guess we talked about, like, it's more a loss of expectations and hopes and dreams and plans than it is like a loss of the person that you felt inside you. So we just kind of talked about that and prayed about that. And like I said, I think we met in August of last year. And my original idea was to try to get like a group together, like a support group for men. And we met, the two of us, and a pastor at our church. And he's like, man, with COVID going on, it's not the greatest time to be doing a support group. So maybe you could do something else. And so we talked about it. And I think I just threw out, like, maybe we could do a podcast one day. And Gabe latched onto that and was like, man, we need to do that. And
today's
I kind of, today's the day. So yeah, it's been really cool to see how we've kind of, as you can already see, it's hard for me to give a short blurb, but it's something that we've tried to just go through, like, what did we experience and what would we have liked to hear, like to have heard, and kind of just walk that out, like everything from like Christian theology to just like practical experiences of how to maintain a good relationship with your wife, or to be kind to people who mean well when they say, I'm sorry for your loss. And you're like, you don't know anything about my loss. What are you talking about? So it's practical. And there's a lot more, like, we've already sat down and probably written out ideas for like probably 20 or 30 more episodes. So we'll see.
Wow. Nice plan. Is there more of a planner and then more of a social media person between both of you? What are your roles?
Will is doing all that. Will is like, he's our planner, which is amazing. And then he's handling our social media stuff, which is also amazing. And then basically I just plug in the computer and I'm there to like bounce stuff off of. So yeah.
There's always
Somebody's got to
one.
get power to that computer, you know?
Yeah.
That's
You
important.
got to plug it in, you know.
Absolutely.
He keeps
All
it
of
from
our
being the
computers now
will.
are on.
Yeah.
There
So
you
that
go.
worked.
We're doing great.
So I did my
Yeah.
job.
He certainly keeps it from being me monologuing for 45 minutes, and that's probably appreciated by everybody. But
My nephew, like he had done a little mini podcast, I guess a year or so ago. He recorded about 5 or 6 episodes when he was still a college student, and so he kind of knew how to do some of this stuff as far as recording and getting some mics and whatnot. And so I was just like, look, bro, you're not doing yours right now. Let me have all your stuff and show me how to use it. And
That's
so,
awesome. That's a good way to approach it.
Yeah, so that's how we
Cool.
got it. I've got his bag of stuff upstairs, and he's letting us use it. And he kind of helped us, learn how to get into GarageBand and record. So that's what we're recording with. And we were using some of his fancy mics that he bought, but tonight we just actually used like some lavaliers when we were recording with the little mic splitter, and it sounded great. So I think we're going to go to that. Because it sounded better than our other ones have.
Oh no!
Isn't it funny when you get a setup, and I've done probably all of them over the years, where you collect stuff and then you're like, oh, this USB mic seems to work fine. It said maybe all that stuff wasn't there. What did you guys find a lot of? There's the technical obstacles in learning how to do it, but I'm curious about the emotional obstacles. Was it daunting at all to approach this and say, boy, I'm just bleeding out in the open here. Here's my grief and my experience. Did you find that to be intimidating or healing, or what was that like?
I'll jump in there first. Again, 16 years removed, from that. And then we had a miscarriage about a year and a half after that. And so I've had a lot of years, to kind of deal with that. And I've had an opportunity to communicate with several men over the years, friends, that ended up going through the same thing. And so, I've had that opportunity, I guess, to open up and be vulnerable. Spoken a couple of different times, publicly about, loss from a dad's perspective and that kind of thing. And so for me, it wasn't that difficult. And I wrote a book. If that's okay, I'll give a quick little shout out. It's called Thy Will Be Done. You can look at thywillbedonebook.com. So, that was very therapeutic, like you mentioned just a minute ago, Dwight, to get those words down, in that book. And so I've been able to process this for a number of years. And so to put myself out there emotionally, wasn't that difficult, but I'll let Will answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we mentioned, we're both Christians, and this is a podcast from a Christian perspective. And we want there to be something positive that came from the lives of our children. And I guess, and this is kind of a side note that I don't want to get into, it's not my story to tell, but I have a friend who not long before the podcast started, he and his wife had miscarried like 5 or 6 months before, and basically that kind of created a division between them, that like they were grieving differently, and I guess couldn't communicate with each other. And so it eventually ended in an affair and divorce. And so that to me was kind of like something, not that our podcast is going to fix marriages, like we don't claim to have that kind of power, but we want there to be a resource out there for someone that maybe is hurting, maybe like kind of our thought process is like, guys, not all guys, but some guys are probably going to be too prideful to admit that they're hurting, that they're grieving, and they don't want to talk about this with their wife because like their wife is crying all day and they don't know, I haven't cried yet. And so like, how am I going to relate to her? And so this is going to get weird. She's going to get awkward. And so we wanted there to be something out there. And I think, like you mentioned too, it has been healing. Like for me being, being a year and a half out, it's been something that I was a history major in college. And so I go down rabbit trails and I research here and I look down there. And for me, like to write these episodes, like the notes, and to do them well, I want to make sure everything we're saying like lines up with what the Bible says, and that I'm using quotes from C.S. Lewis or quotes from here or there. And so I have to do a lot of reading and studying and praying before we do the podcast. And so I think it's been helpful for me to process through things, I guess, and also kind of to reflect on like, where was I when it first happened, and try to get back in that mindset of like, these guys may be someone like Gabe that's 10, 15 years out, or maybe someone like me that's a year or less. And so I think all of that it's hard, but it's been rewarding to see people that have not, we don't have a huge following yet, but it's been cool to see the few people that have reached out and been like, man, I listened to that first episode and I was crying the whole time because that's what I went through too. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes it worth it, that if it's being used to encourage or, one person, then it's worth the time.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Yeah. When you say that, do you think, what are some of those obstacles for men? Is it just kind of the way we're taught to be, that we're supposed to be too tough we're supposed to be the comforter, not the comforted?
Yeah, brother, I think so. I mean, man, you look at every male figure that we've ever watched in movies, from John Wayne to, the Bruce Willis characters, and Die Hard and all that. I mean, there's no emotion with those guys. And so we, man, I felt like such a chump. I remember this vividly, like crying, weeping, sobbing in the NICU when one of our daughters was going through cardiac arrest. She's a couple days old, and feeling like such a punk because I was crying, because I was like, man, I'm supposed to be stoic in this rock and like, be there for my wife, and there's nothing biblical that says I should be that way. We talked about tonight that, the Bible says Jesus wept. It says that a couple of different places, right? Like, but media that I've ingested my whole life from books or movies or whatever, is you don't cry. As a man, you don't cry. You suck it up and you do not cry. It don't matter if you break your leg in half on the football field, you better suck it up, and so,
that's right.
So yeah, I think that's the thing, man. It's like, that's just ingrained in us. And obviously there's some good to that. We don't need a bunch of crybaby men running around, but at the same time, when you're going through something like this, like, it's okay to grieve, right? It's okay to show emotion. And then we want to give the dudes the tools to be like, all right, now after you've expressed that emotion and felt that grief, what do you do now to pick yourself up and move forward for your wife, for yourself, for your family, for your community, for your job, whatever?
Exactly. Yeah. And communication is key. Like, I know that statistics with losing a child, the divorce rate is just higher because they can't cope.
Right. Yeah. That's so true.
We had to talk about it.
We told a little story on one of our episodes about a girl that approached us. She was a massage therapist in the hospital after my wife had delivered, and she was giving my wife like a foot massage, like as she was in her recovery room. And this was like a day or two after one of our children, I guess after the first child had passed away. And she just said exactly what you said, Bri. She was like, look, we had a similar situation with twins a few years ago, and we did not communicate. We shut each other out, and our marriage did not last. And she was like, so please promise me. And this girl didn't know us. This was the first day we met her. She was like, promise me that you will speak to one another. Promise me you'll communicate even when you don't want to, because I want your marriage to last. And man, she was like an angel, sent to us. And still see that girl around town. I'm forever indebted to her because that wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you see where tragedy is an opportunity to increase intimacy or an opportunity to be torn apart.
Yeah, that's great.
Say. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear, like, your Broken Brain podcast, what the psychology is behind that. But yeah,
Dwight's really good. Dwight's so easy to talk to. I'm always like, Dwight, this is what's going on. Like,
well, I'm already planning in my head about how to get Will and Gabe on my show. So,
sounds good.
Yeah,
right.
It's an experience. I'm curious. What are some of the things that you've learned going through that process that have been valuable to you? Like when you're, obviously, and you said before, it's not the kind of thing you can nutshell, even just the topic of the show, but because grief isn't one of those things that you get through. I mean, you get through certain aspects of the suffering, but it's always with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually like say we just recorded a podcast, and that's one of the things we talked about is like you're never going to be normal again as you were before. And I think, like Gabe said, guys want to be strong, want to be stoic, want to be like this immovable object that nothing that happens can change me or affect me. And that's just not like, it's not a healthy way, and it's not a realistic way to get through grief. And we talked about if you if you do that, if you try to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, then you may be able to do that, but it's not likely to end in something positive and a better relationship with your wife. You're a more committed employee. You're a better father to your living children. Like it's not likely to happen. And so I think that's something that, you need to be mindful of when you're going through this is you have to let other people help you, whether that's, just a friend, whether that's your church community, your work community, whoever it is, to be open. And I think for me, like one of the biggest things that I've learned is, like we said over and over again, just that you have to be willing to talk to your spouse, that your most important relationships between you and God and you and your wife. And if you get those in a good place, then everything else is going to fall into its place. And if you ignore those things and you try to have, which I know there were times in my marriage where I was more interested in like going out and having fun with my friends than I was to spend the time with my wife. And that doesn't last very long. That, you don't have a very enjoyable marriage. You don't have a good relationship with your wife. And then you start to see like you're having problems with your wife and you're not as in a good of a mood to hang out with friends or to be a good worker. And then that crumbles and then it's a vicious cycle. So I think having that openness and that honesty and the vulnerability, like we said, is just a really important thing to have in any relationship, but especially if you've been through a loss, like the death of a child.
Yeah, and I think like things like trauma and PTSD and loss actually like brings people together as well, like with friends and my friend Chris Revel, who did the Let's Chat podcast, like we started talking after like I had a traumatic birth with my daughter, with both my son and my daughter, and then we kind of bonded over that intense like moment, and because his wife had a traumatic birth too, and so like through trauma we were able to like be friends and like grow a podcast and also just like be humans. Like I would send his daughter little like flash tutu because it was adorable. So yeah, loss is, gosh, I was talking to D today and I was like, PTSD sucks. Like it just, I'm so mad. But
that's
really
a great point. Like say you become immediately like bonded to some people that's been through what you've been through. Like that, no matter what kind of, if it's a similar situation like that. And like I've experienced that just in the community. I remember this one time I was taking my kids to a birthday party a few years back, and it was one of those like jump places with trampolines and the blow ups and whatever. Which as a chiropractor, I don't love those places. I see so many injuries from them. I should love them. I should advertise there, I guess. Yeah, probably.
Hand out cards,
I know. That's what I should do. I'm gonna stand outside.
I saw a kid bust his arm on one of those things while my kids were playing on one in one of those bouncy places.
Oh my goodness.
It freaked me out too. I just was like, oh no. Oh, see, I'm hitting the microphone. I'm so traumatized.
Right, that's right.
Well, but go ahead. You mentioned you were seeing them bounce.
Yeah, so we were in there in this place, and we were just kind of making small talk with some of the other parents. And this lady looked at me, and she was like, are you Gabe O'Sullivan? And I was like, yes, ma'am. And I was like, oh, crap.
So what
I do, kind of thing. And she was like, the one that
like,
wrote
this is the police. No.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. She was like, the one that wrote the book. And then I was like, yes, ma'am. And then she immediately like burst into tears and just ran over and hugged me. And, never seen this lady in my life, but something in that book, spoke to her because of the situation that she had been through with her husband and their kid, whatever. And so just what you said, Bri, like that trauma can bring people together, for sure.
I just want to jump in there quickly. Like that's true when you mentioned your book. Like for me and Gabe, like really, we go to the same church, and I knew who he was, but like the way we got to know each other was right after we lost our son. I was looking for people to reach out to and to talk to, and like, have this relationship as to like, what did you do? How did you deal with this? And I talked to a couple different guys, but Gabe is one of the guys that I talked to probably just weeks or a month or so out. And I guess we didn't really talk but like once or twice, but Gabe stayed in touch with me probably more than any of the other guys. He would just text me randomly on a Wednesday morning and be like, hey man, praying for you and your wife. And when I found out that he wrote a book, I read the book, and I like have sticky notes of like, I felt this and all that. And I have like, if you look at my copy of the book, it's got like 60 sticky notes in it of like, yep, felt that. This is the time when that happened. And I just got all these things throughout it. And I really like reading the book. I was like, yeah, this guy gets it. He understands what I've been through, and he's a cool guy I want to keep talking to. And so that's why whenever I started thinking about doing something, a support group or whatever, he's one of the guys I wanted to include. And that
Thank
kind
you,
of turned
man.
into this.
Check it out.
He's the first person to ever call me a cool guy. So I'm like, can we get a recording of this? Because I need to tell my 14-year-old daughter.
Hey, you got
Oh
one
no, I
here.
forgot to press record.
Let's call her. Let's get her to watch, to play the tape back.
That's right.
Well, it's one of the things that, I mean, technology in general, it's got a lot of uses, all of which are good, as it turns out. And one of the definitely good uses of technology is the ability to reach out. And I feel like the COVID crisis, as you said, kind of trying to find some positivity and some tragedy. One of the things that it's done is y'all would have had maybe a support group of a couple people sitting on some folding chairs in a gymnasium. This is the picture that I'm putting together of the movie about the alternate reality of your lives.
Yes.
But, and what do you get there? You get probably a good number of people, great experience and all that. And as it turned out, you weren't able to do that. And look what's been born from it. I mean, you'd already put your book out there to reach people, but you have a much bigger gymnasium and a lot more folding chairs that are out there because of the podcast.
Awesome. That's a great one.
That was nice. Right.
Makes me think of anger management with Adam Sandler.
Oh my gosh. Hated that movie. So we talked a little bit about your experience in podcasting is from your friend, or is it your nephew?
Yes.
Nephew?
So did you have any other podcasting experience before you got started? Like you said, no equipment or anything?
Yeah.
Listening
to podcasts.
That's
about it.
Yeah. So we just, I had this computer and he let us borrow all his stuff. And his first episode, he showed us how to use the GarageBand app and how to plug in everything. And I tried to record it, with my phone while he was doing it. So then on the second episode, when he was predisposed or indisposed, like we just went back and was like, oh, let's watch the video again. What are we supposed to do?
Probably took us 30 or 40 minutes to get set up for that second episode.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it doesn't sound amazing yet. We're still working on trying to learn how to mix it properly and, do the whole production thing and all that. And so then the episode with our buddy Mr. Steve there was like this torrential downpour, and my office has like a skylight, and so like you hear rain.
Yeah.
It's so that one's, man, I really feel bad about that. And of course, I have no idea how to fix it.
I only chuckle just because of memory shared. Speaking of shared trauma, here's the shared trauma of podcasting. Of having those kind of situations, but. It's a good technique. They say, well, in business, it's a good technique to find a dearth of something and then fill it, right? And say, oh, that's not here. But even more, it's amplified, right? When there's heart behind it. And you guys definitely, as you put it, you found out that when you looked for resources, you didn't find a lot of resources for dads and for men. And to create that, I think that's a really powerful thing. Because I mean, I don't know how y'all feel. I know as a man, sometimes there's that obstacle you mentioned of we're supposed to be tough, and when you find that, like if it's a bunch, if I'm going to go to a support group and it's all moms who've experienced loss, I mean, there's a little part of me, and I think as a guy who tries to be a nice guy, I feel like I'm invading a little, right? I mean, like this is their space, and they're talking. I don't want to get in and be like, oh, hi, I'll tell you all how to grieve or whatever. I mean, that's what I'm going to be self-conscious of. And so you're creating a great conversation.
Yeah, I think there's something that I had never heard of until we lost our son, but I guess it's mainly in churches. It's a program called Grief Share, and I guess it's primarily like focused on like, I don't know, 60-plus-year-olds who have lost a spouse, but it's like something that churches do, and they have classes, and it's got a workbook and all this stuff, and it's just a big catch-all of anyone who's going through grief. And my parents went through it, and like my in-laws went through it, and so my wife and I went through it, and it was good. Like there were things that were helpful, but like you say, it did feel weird when like Hannah, my wife, and I are in there, and we were, I don't know, 28, 29 at the time, and like the next youngest person was 40 something, and then most people were like 65 or whatever, 70. And so like you say, it felt weird. We're like they're talking about losing this person they've been with for 50 something years, and we're like, I don't really know how to add to this conversation, or what am I supposed to get from this? And so it did feel like you say, it wasn't our space, and we didn't really know where we fit in there. So that was kind of where the idea morphed out of that for the support group, was like, let's just do the same thing for our niche. And so it kind of came out of that. But I agree with you that it's tough to just go into one of these podcasts. That, like, what I found after we lost our son was like, I don't remember the names of them, but there's several like Christian, non-Christian, all sorts of different podcasts that are like for grieving mothers, for miscarriage. And it did feel weird. It was like, like you say, I'm listening on a conversation that's not for me. And it almost just felt like, I don't really know what to do here.
Yeah. Like, so I can't understand or relate to it as much.
Valuable to learn, but then also there's an experience is what you're looking for, right? An experiential thing to say, sharing an experience and healing together. Yeah, that's are you getting what kind of reaction have you got as you've put it out there?
Well, I guess I say I don't know how to track like all of our listens, so I'm not real sure what we're up to now, because
I track them on Podbean.
Yeah,
it's not a lot. So I think we have like 260 downloads or listens or whatever over all 13 episodes. Probably just our moms re-clicking.
Yeah, probably. I know my mom's listened to them, and so she's probably at least like 20 of those.
Tell my listeners to do that.
Yeah, just play. You don't even have to listen. Just like silence your phone and press play. Yeah, just bump those numbers up. Yeah. But so I don't know. I mean, I think it's going well. I talked to my wife about it last night, about how we feel about the podcast and what our reach is, like you asked. And there are two guys that, one was referred by a neighbor, and the other guy was someone that I guess was connected through my mom's church. And I know both of them have recently lost a son, and one of them commented, like I said earlier, on one of our posts, and just said, I listened to this first episode and I just can't stop crying the whole way through, because I'm glad this is here, and it means a lot to me, and I've been through this. And the other guy, he's got other things that are going on in his life, and I've just been continuing to pray for him, because he's got tons of things piling on top of other things. But we're trying to reach out to him and be there for him. And like you said, about having your heart behind it. I don't know. Gabe has an established career, and he's great at it. I'm in a good career path, but I would actually love for this to be my job. Like, I would love for this to be like a nonprofit that I could do forever, because I feel like it's worthy of my time, and I've always wanted to help people that didn't know how to do it. And to see those few little people like start trickling in that say that it means something to them, to me, makes it all more worth it. Just like the time that I spent preparing for an episode, or whatever it is. And it's been neat to see, like I go on Facebook and look at the reach or whatever of your post, and it's like it went from like the first week it was like 50 people, 60 people, and then it's like 600 people, and like I don't even know what a reach is. I don't know if anybody actually saw it or they just scrolled past it, but it's cool to see the numbers go up. So
it's cool. And well, and then one of the nice things about podcasts is, as you all know, as listeners, right? I think everybody does this, where you find one, you like it, and so you go back and listen. It's nice to have those sitting there, so when someone comes across it, they can find the benefit of all those. I don't know if we really touched on, like, what's your format? Do you guys have guests, or you talk to each other, or just you said you had someone there when it was raining?
Yes. So he was our first guest. We've got a list of other guests that we're going to have on. But the other has just been us talking back and forth. But we've got about 5 or 6 other folks that we know that we want to have on, that we love and respect, and have also been through the same situation, and just want to glean some knowledge from them as well.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how we'd envisioned it, was to have, like we said, just some episodes of us exploring some practical concept, some theological concept from the Bible, and then interspersing that with, like, let's do an interview with Mr. Grant lost a child, 2 children that were in their 20s. And so, like, we wanted to expand that to have this not just be a podcast about infant loss, but about the 5-year-old, 10, 20, 25-year-old. And, we actually got into that in the interview with Mr. Grant. Like, is it worse, or what's the difference between losing a child at birth and losing a child at 25? But I think either way, what we came back to was, you're losing a child, and that's a unique death to experience. And I think it's something that you can, like we talked about earlier, bond with someone who lost a 5-year-old, a 30-year-old, whatever. So,
And whether or not you expect to lose someone, like if you know that they're going to die because they have cancer, and then what if they pass away suddenly, the impact is still pretty traumatic. So I agree with what you said about losing a child, and doesn't matter how, doesn't matter when, or if you knew or didn't know, you're gonna grieve.
And that's what we hope too, like Bri's, like, that through this is that there'll be stuff that people can take out of what we're talking about and apply that to any situation in their life that might cause them to go, what in the world just happened? Like where it's a PTSD type, situation. It doesn't matter if it was the loss of a relationship that was, like, to that person that wrecked their world, right? Or loss of a career or a job, or some people are really vain their nice car, whatever the case may be. That there's something that they'll be able to glean from this, and then attach it or apply it to other parts of their life, just to help them, move through the process.
I think it's a holistic goal. Like when I sat down and wrote, again, I said, like, I'm a words guy, I'm a history major, so I actually wrote like a prospectus of what I wanted this group to be when I took it to Gabe and our pastor. And so, like, the mission statement or whatever it's a holistic view kind of a man and what he should be as a father and a husband and a leader. And so we want to use the experiences that we've been through and what the Lord has done in our lives to encourage men and help them become better fathers, better Christians, and better husbands. And just to kind of go from there. And it's not just like Gabe said, deal with the loss of your child, and then with this podcast and the rest of it's, whatever, you're on your own. The hope for this podcast is that by drawing closer to the Lord and dealing with this loss in a positive way, the rest of your life will be changed as well.
Takes it a little to that deeper kind of feeling where we're all people, right? We're all the emotions we feel are very much the same, even though our situations are different. And that's where I think that's a great point, because it really does match to some of the medical research they do with trauma, is that it really touches everybody. And even in like modern therapies and stuff, they tell counselors and psychiatrists and to be what they call trauma informed, meaning that you should be looking for that. It's going to be there somewhere, that Most people have a form of trauma one way or the other. And so I think you're absolutely right in that you're addressing not only those who have had the specific type of loss, but who have had loss, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I had a question about your cover art. I was curious. I'm always interested in how people get logos and things, and I don't know if I'm going to hold this up right. This is you guys, right? Oh,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
us.
that's y'all. And I subscribed. You can see it.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Yes.
Proof of subscription. But
Thank you.
I'm always curious. Did the art? Is there a meaning to that? Where did you?
Man,
How'd you
this is-
settle on that?
It's
Uh-oh.
super embarrassing to answer this question right here because
Nice.
we have a different logo that I had a girl, maybe we'll bring it up,
Yeah,
that I
keep
had a
going.
lady make for us, and it somehow it would not be accepted by Apple because it wasn't the right configuration or whatever. And so on Podbean, they just had like these 10 random things that you could find, and I was like, or that you could use that would work on those platforms. And I was like, bro, I can't get Apple to accept this thing.
Yeah.
This girl's too busy to get our logo reformatted. I reached out to somebody else I knew that does graphic design. They never replied back to me. And I was like, so I want to get these episodes up. So I'm going to click this generic one right now, and we'll go back and fix it later. So that's what it's supposed to
Oh,
look
there
like.
you go. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I like the other. It was soothing to me. It wasn't a gotcha moment. I didn't mean it to be like,
No,
hey
I
y'all,
know.
what's up?
I know. I'm with you, but I did. I looked at that and I was like, oh, that looks kind of manly, like earthy, like we're hiking through the desert somewhere
There you go.
in Utah, maybe. You know,
Holistic. There you go. Yeah, we got.
I should have just made a
Well,
story
So,
about it.
yeah, that's right. I should have made something up.
It's still. I'm gonna twist it. I'm reframing it to where it still is meaningful, though, right? Because just to what you said, and they always say, when's the right time to do something is as soon as you can. That's the right time to do the right thing, right? So you're like, let's get it out there. I can't get 3,000 by 3,000 formatting on my picture right now. That's the magic number, podcasters, all y'all out there. I've Googled it many a time. Maybe we can help with that, Bri.
Just let us know.
You know how to do stuff.
You know how to do stuff too.
Bri has marketable skills, but anyway, I like the so maybe tell us what goes into that logo, the one that you want. Is that a compass on there?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll show you again.
So I guess I'll show you that. And the kind of the idea of the name, Will, again, was Will's there. I give him credit for that. Is that we felt like when we were going through that situation, we felt like we were lost boys. Like we couldn't find our way out of a paper bag. We were in Walmart and we didn't know where our parents were, right? And we're screaming, we're scared. We don't want to, that whole thing. And then, but through the healing process and through God's grace, for sure, then we became found fathers. We realized that we're not lost boys, that we still have a purpose, that even though our children were in heaven, we still were their father. And that realization was powerful and strong because initially, we were like, oh man, we were dads yesterday. Today we're not dads, but then we realized, we still are dads. Our kids have just preceded us and gone on before us, and so that's where we're hoping to take these guys on a journey from feeling like a lost kid, in a corn maze or in the Walmart, so to speak, and then really helping them realize, no, what you went through had a purpose. Your kid had a purpose. Their life mattered. It was in that situation that you went through was not to destroy you. It was to make you better, bigger, stronger, more helpful. And then you can realize that you are still a father.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yes, absolutely.
Powerful.
That was strong. Yep. How do you follow up that, Dwight?
I pause and wait for Bri to do something. That's what I do.
Yeah, no, we were looking forward to this episode because, I asked Dwight because, he's a therapist, he does PTSD and trauma, and he's very good at what he does. And I met Stephen Grant through like a trauma-related experience. I swear, it just brings people together. Yeah, and everyone has like a different loss. I lost my brother and sister, and they're actually buried in Greenville where we live. So I get to see them. So the trauma there is just it's just you can't put into words.
Mhm.
And so I commend you guys. It's fantastic that you're able to verbalize your feelings so well after such a short period of time, right?
Thank you.
Um, So for someone listening to your podcast, where should they start? I know that the first 3 episodes are talking about like the experiences that you guys had. So should someone start there or?
Yeah, the first episode was probably one of our longest. It was just like the why, really. Like, why are we doing this podcast? What's the hope for it? Like I said, we laid out the mission statement, the plan, all that stuff. And then the second episode, if I remember correctly, we got few enough where I can remember most of them. The second episode, I think I started with telling the story of our son's name was actually Gabriel as well. And so, yeah. And told the story of Gabriel. And then I think the third episode was Gabe asking me questions about that and kind of exploring it some more. And then the fourth was Gabe telling the story of his girls. And so like that's, I mean, you can jump in. I guess the fifth episode is when we start getting into like the deeper questions. But if you want to know who we are and you want to learn about our story and know about our children and know that we have been through the same loss that you have as a listener, then yeah, you probably should start at episode 1, which seems easy to figure out, but yeah. But yeah.
Do you guys like end each episode with something like positive? Is there a way, because I know that sometimes it's you talk about things and they're deep and you're sad and then you're in this place, but do you guys make it a point to leave it on an uplifting note?
I think
yes, that is what we're trying to do. Certainly, you know, is trying to end it on a high note, and then if there's going to be a follow up to that episode, then we'll remind folks like, hey, this is part 1 or part 2 or whatever of this mini series that we're going to do, and to hopefully leave a little bit of a teaser for the next episode. We're trying to keep them in that 30-minute or less time frame. We were thinking, hey, maybe that's somebody's average commute, to work each day or to work and back from work. And so that way they'll have a little digestible, bit of information to get as they drive.
Yeah, which is another thing that Gabe brought to the podcast, because if it was me, I'd have like 2.5 hour long podcasts of just me talking the whole time. And I probably, like we said, my mom would be the one that listens to it and no one else. But I think like in writing the episodes, I think I guess kind of my overriding thought process behind putting them together and what like the goal is for each podcast, and the whole goal is to encourage, but also to challenge men to a certain extent. Like you are a man, like Christian belief is that you have a place, role in the household, a role as a father, that you're a protector, you're a provider, you're a leader. And so like you basically need to work through this healing process and work through your grief so that you can be who you were meant to be. And I think that's like the challenging part, I guess, of the episodes is, we're saying, in love, of course, but we're saying like, you need to be this, you need to love your wife. Like the episode we're going through right now is, how do I relate to my wife? How does this loss change our relationship as a husband and wife? And what we'll give a teaser here. Well, I guess we did at the end of the last episode.
Yeah.
Like the next episode is going to be like practical things you can do to pursue your wife. And when you're going through this loss, this pain, like you need to wake up every day and choose to love her. And like there's going to be times, especially in grief, but always as a human, where you wake up and you're like, I just don't feel in love today. I just feel like I'm going to have a bad day. My wife's going to get on my case, or she got on my case last night. And I just feel like letting my mind wander, doing this or thinking that. And you have to wake up every day and choose, I'm going to write her a note and tell her I love her. I'm going to text her at 11 and tell her I love her. I'm going to, whatever. I'm going to come home and I'm going to do the laundry so she doesn't have to do this, or I'm going to do, whatever. So it's like practical steps is one of the things we're about to go into. that we're challenging the guys. You need to be this. You can't just sit back and wait for your wife to get over this loss and then things are normal and things are good. You have to help her through it. You have to work and walk beside her.
Yeah, it's a good practical stuff. I think that's a good way to engage people, but especially engage men in a way. It's like you try to get men to talk about their feelings. You put a campfire in between them or something like that. Then suddenly they can poke it with sticks. That's something to do, and then they can talk.
Mm-hmm.
But even better, you're giving them like tools to actually work on. Like, oh, there's that text I can do at 11. Okay, I remember Will said that on the thing. I'm going to try that. That's good. Really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to ask writers this, Gabe. I don't know if there is a straightforward answer to this, but a lot of authors do have this. Is there a place people can go to get your book that is better for you personally, for them to purchase it from?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Because I think I've yet to get Amazon royalty in 16 years. But if that means that, or maybe my wife just didn't tell me. I don't know. That could be the case. So, not really is the answer. I mean, I just have it listed right now on Amazon, paperback or e-version. And but thank you, for asking that question. So.
Okay,
so we're gonna buy
if there's anything that trickles back to you that way, or I guess the big thing now people are doing is going to independent bookstores and ordering there too to help them stay open. But I don't know if that ends up more for you or less for you. Anyway, whatever.
I actually have no idea. I'm not been very astute in my business savvy about that book. That's for sure.
You can tell we're all in this for the money.
Yeah.
But it's exactly.
Right.
See that roundabout way that we just highlighted? You're not.
That's right.
That's nice.
Brother. Thank you. Yes, sir. That's awesome. I'm writing another book. Hopefully it'll be out later this year. It's going to be called From Panic to Peace or something in that regard. So just figured there was a lot of panic going on the past year and a half. And so giving folks, again, like you said a minute ago, some practical steps on how do I move from panic to peace. So hopefully I'll be out later.
Awesome.
That sounds helpful.
Yeah. It helped me writing it. Very, very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Cool.
So one of our last questions, what do you enjoy most about podcasting? And what have you found that you enjoy the most? Is like connecting with people or being able to reach people or?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's a little of all of it. Like I talked about earlier, I'm a history nerd, and I guess like I'm a theology nerd because it's like I believe that Jesus came and died on the cross, but it's like there's 2,000 years of history of like how do we work that out, and like getting into that, learning like the problem of evil is like something people have been trying to come up with. Like, why is there evil for 2,000 years? And there's classes on the problem of evil and everything else. So really getting into that and researching is like giving myself an excuse to nerd out on those things. But also, I guess on a more relational strain there, I want to be, and like I said, earlier, this is something that I could foresee and hope could become more of a full-time thing for me. I would love to be able to like meet these guys somewhere like in person or call. I've tried to make myself available if anyone does want someone to reach out to and someone to talk to or someone to listen. That's what I guess is my prayer from this, and my hope is that the podcast will be something that isn't just you can listen to us at work and if you're having a good day, that's great. It's helpful. If you're not having a good day, maybe you don't even feel like listening. I want to be someone that like can build relationships with these guys. And if they're having that really bad day, that they're just feeling like they can't make it through that day, or they can't stand to go home to their wife who's crying over this, they could call me or Gabe or reach out to us, and I'm willing to stop what I'm doing and, call them back and talk to them or, whatever. I think the thing to me is seeing life change and seeing hope through the loss. And I think that to me, that's kind of what, not exactly, but that's kind of what I always wanted to do when I was little. I was like, I wanted to be a knight. I wanted to help and protect and defend. And so it's like to see that there is, like we said earlier, a need out there. And if I can do my small part in sharing love and hope with someone else, that to me is very fulfilling and very worthwhile.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I would say, from a personal standpoint, it's just the idea that there might be some dude that's out there listening that hears something that he can relate to, and that gives him a bit of an aha moment to make him realize that, number one, he's not the only dude that's ever felt that way, and that number two, here's some guys that's been in that boat that's got over that wave that he hasn't been able to get over yet. And then, like Will said, to have that opportunity to hopefully pour into guys' lives, not only just virtually, but over the phone or whatever the case may be, to let dudes know that, we're here for you. We're here for y'all. I know it meant the world to me when I had a guy that he was a pastor at our church at the time that, I knew him, we were friends, but we weren't like great friends. And he would make me go to lunch with him and make me talk to him. And I hated it because I did not want to talk about anything.
It's probably so good for you.
Yeah, but it was so good, Bri. It was so good, like you said, to be able to sit down, and he pulled those emotions and he pulled those questions, out of me. And if we can be that for other guys, hopefully, actually communicating, email, phone, whatever, or at least them just hearing something that, makes them understand that, hey, you're not the only one that's ever been through this, and you can get through it because we've gotten through it. And so hopefully that will be something that we'll see come from this.
Wonderful.
Awesome. So, see,
Well,
Y'all
thank
are
y'all
awesome, by the
for
way.
being
Thank
here.
Thank y'all. Y'all are amazing.
We're just really grateful to have you here. I think that along the lines of what I hear for both of you when you say what's the best about podcasting, it's the excuse to talk to people. And some of the coolest people I've ever met, and you guys are on the list now, just so you know, are because of podcasting, actually, because of reaching out to and getting to talk to people. I always say it's an excuse to call anyone in the world and say, hey, I heard about you and I like what you're doing. And it doesn't sound like a stalker if you say, I have a podcast. I have a podcast. Can we talk on it? If you don't end it with that, it sounds weird. They're like, okay, why are you calling me? How did you get my number? So it's an excuse to meet cool people, and we're really grateful you're able and willing to come on Let's Chat Live with us today.
It's been great. Yeah, we're very thankful for the opportunity.
So if someone wants to find out more about your show or how to listen, how can they do that?
Well, you can find us on social media. You've got the Twitter run across the bottom there at Boys Found. If you want to find us on Instagram or Facebook, you can search Lost Boys to Found Fathers, and we'll be on there as well. And if you want to find us on your platform, I think we're on Podbean is where we're casting from, or whatever that you call that, pushing it from. And we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, I believe. So you should just be able to search Lost Boys to Found Fathers at any of those, and you can find us.
Awesome.
Right.
And Dwight, where can we find you?
Well, you can always find me at Break a Brain on Twitter. I tweet about the episodes or come up with dumb jokes or tweet about, getting little spats about what's going to be in Phase 5 of Marvel, whatever. And you can always listen to The Broken Brain on anywhere that you get podcasts. And we got, in fact, you gave us a little narration for the next episode. We're talking about that family movie, Song of the Sea, which also ties in with grief very, very directly.
So
and it's going to start with Bri giving a synopsis of the story, and then we'll talk about it. So,
you didn't tell me what it was for. Fine. Wow. Again, this is Let's Chat Live. I am one of your hosts, Bri and Dwight, and with us we have Will and Gabe from the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. You can learn more about our show at letschatpodcast.net and about our club at letschatpodcast.net, and you can find us on Twitter at Let's Chat Live. And thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you guys have a fantastic night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.